Just a quick disclaimer for those who have sensitivities to certain concepts. This manga contains scenes of abuse both mentally and physically, murder, extreme gore, rape, and other sexual situations some may find too extreme or even offensive. If this is something you have any aversion to, please do not move forward with this video, and if this is something you're okay with on a storytelling level, then please proceed. Manga, and more manga. I read a lot of it in my spare time, and by spare time, I mean at work. So much so that I decided to say, hey, screw it, let's see if any of these are worth your time. And with time in mind, I'm not going to waste any of yours. Let's see if this manga is for you in 10 minutes or less. Jūjika no Rokunin is a manga written and illustrated by Nakatake Shiryu, and is published in Magazine Pocket. It began publishing in March 9th of 2020, and as of this recording, has 57 chapters. Jūjika no Rokunin is the story of Shun Uruma, who was known as Experiment A by his 5 bullies. Subjected to physical and mental torture throughout the entirety of his 6th grade life, he finally snaps when his parents are murdered and his brother is left comatose. Not only that, but his entire house is burnt to the ground. After moving in with his grandfather, he discovers his grandfather was once a part of something known as the Kitayama Corps, a group of elite soldiers established in World War II, basically established to find new and exciting ways of killing people. But not only that, but his grandfather is willing to help Uruma not only get revenge on those who wronged him, but do it in a way worthy of being called vengeance. The selling point of this manga is the story of Uruma, and just how brutal the revenge he takes can become. Granted, at first, it's a bit off-putting with just how callous and cold Uruma is, but you have to keep in mind that this is a kid who was essentially bred from childhood to become a monster. That isn't to say that Uruma is a bad character, but he can be a bit much for some, especially with how grotesque his methods can be. Granted, it isn't like Uruma stays this cold, unfeeling badass for very long. In fact, I kind of like the idea that he essentially is this cold, trained killer, but at the same time is still a teenager and goes through the trials and tribulations of high school life. It just so happens he also is a cold-blooded murderer. That being said, I can very much understand why some would feel like he's an unlikable character. How can you like someone who's just brutally killing people left and right out of vengeance, right? But I think the manga does an okay job showing that Uruma is not some cold-hearted man with no emotions, and he does have a legit moral compass. He isn't out just to kill random people. He's out to kill those who wronged him, those who made his life a living hell. But I guess in saying that, it is up to one's own mental state and moral compass to truly dictate what that means. Uruma, in a sense, is almost a question hidden in a character. A question to the audience themselves, asking, just how far is too far? Does the punishment befit the crime? Or, even better yet, would you do the same in your situation? And in that sense, I almost enjoy the fact that the manga doesn't shy away from the violence. Can it be too much at points? Of course. But again, I feel like at the end of the day, that is kind of the point. And someone like Uruma is just the right guy to do it through. Going on to the bullies, and let's face it, the only other characters that matter are the bullies. The 5 that put Uruma through utter hell during his childhood, and that is putting it very lightly. They are 100% bad guys. There's no gray area, there's no moral ambiguity. These 5 are villains. And the way the manga writes them, well worthy of the punishment that comes to them, at least in my opinion. The way that the author gives them their own brand of vile does elevate what could be found as extremely one-note characters. Granted, one could say, and that one being me, that they are still very much one-note, but I think that the role they play is more the disaster that characters react to, and not characters that react to the disaster, if you know what I mean. In essence, they are the catalyst, not meant to serve any other purpose other than the ones for Uruma to kill. Again, to some that may seem simplistic, but for this manga I feel it works, because if these guys had any sort of moral gray area, it would kind of make this entire manga fall out the seams. The art in this manga is perfect for what it is, extremely twisted and scratchy, almost like a nightmare at some point. The artist has a very good understanding of how to exaggerate certain aspects of bodies and faces to give this sense of disturbed and brutal. Not to mention the art for the wounds and gore is especially disgusting. In its way, I think it does what it needs to, but it doesn't go overboard. At least by gory manga stand. The only negative I have with this manga is the fact that it can be a little bit too simplistic with its essentially black and white moral. Of course, this is 100% up to the person who's reading it, but for someone like me, I do see that someone like Urama does need at least some sort of kick in the ass to maybe show some kind of gray. But again, as I said before, it would fall apart at the seams the moment it does that. And it actually does seem that where we are now in the manga, without giving spoilers away, that we are doing so. But, of course, that's just to see where the manga goes from here. We're 57 chapters in, and usually manga like this don't actually reach the 100 mark. So we'll see how it ends, because I feel like we're getting closer to the ending. Another thing I have to mention is the pacing. The pacing does seem a little bit breakneck, but I feel that's because the artist feels if he doesn't have a certain person being killed, or if he doesn't have things happening constantly every single chapter, or basically we'll lose our attention. But I don't think that's essentially true. I think that if we took a little bit more time developing Uruma and the family life that he had, because we really don't know much about his family life. We knew that he loved his family and his brother, but we don't know much about them outside of that. It's a very interesting thing, and I hope that they give us more, and perhaps they will as the story goes on. Overall, I think Jūjika no Rokunin is a very interesting manga, but not without its flaws. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that for some, it can go a bit overboard. And for some, I do think that it feels a bit too much. But at the same time, I also say that that's kind of the point. The whole point of the manga is not to be this deep introspection of morals and justice and what does that mean to you and me. It's supposed to be a straightforward vengeance type of manga. And in its way, I think it does that very well. Is it the best manga about revenge I've ever read? No, not even close. But at the same time, I do think that there's a lot of merit to this manga. And in a way, I still do find it kind of captivating. I think Uruma, going forward, is going to grow into a character that I think is going to be very memorable. Because there is times where you just see him as him, and you see glimpses of who he was before. This kind, loving soul. And you almost tell that there's something about him that just doesn't want to do this, but he needs to. And I like that kind of underlying conflicting nature to a character. But again, it's not overt, and it's not something that's supposed to be the main focus of the character. So overall, I think it's just fine. I think if you're going to go read it, do keep in mind it is extremely gory, it is extremely violent, and it's basically revenge for the sake of revenge. And if you like seeing this kind of gross realism to the type of vengeance that can bring, then I say I recommend it. If you're not into this kind of stuff and you need a bit more moral ambiguity and you hate black and white, then I say stay away from this manga 100%. But that's everything, and that is time, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for watching another Manga in 10 minutes. I have been AJ. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.